There are two basic types of statistical studies. There are observational studies where researchers observe and or measure characteristics of sample members. Basically, most of the examples we've had so far up till now have been observational studies where you simply ask someone's opinion about something or you just measure some characteristics about that person. An experiment is the other type of statistical study. In an experiment, researchers impose some kind of treatment on all or some of the sample members and record the results. So they impose a treatment. Now, many experiments split sample members into two groups in order to determine if that treatment has had an effect. There would be what we call the treatment group and what we call the control group. Now, the treatment group are the sample members who receive the treatment that's being tested in the experiment. The control group are the sample members who do not receive the treatment that you're interested in this experiment. So, for example, let's say a researcher recruits Alzheimer's patients to see if a new drug slows the progression of their dementia. So you would have, and this researcher would split those Alzheimer patients into two groups. You would have the treatment group, which are those Alzheimer's patients who they actually give this new drug to. So Alzheimer's patients who receive the new drug. And then you'd have the control group, which would also be Alzheimer's patients. But they would be the patients who do not receive the drug. And the reason you want two groups like this is that generally with an experiment, you would have these patients take the drug for a period of time, maybe up to 6 months or a year. And what you want to do is kind of measure them at the beginning to see where they are in terms of their cognition. And then you would measure them after maybe 3 months, after 6 months. And because you've got one group that's taken the drug and one group that's not, you can compare those results. You know where they started, and then you can compare to see if there are differences as time goes on with this one group having the new drug and the other group not. So the two groups allow the researchers to compare whether the drug is having an impact. In some experiments, you may have something called the placebo effect. The placebo effect is when the effectiveness of a treatment is influenced by the patient's perception of how effective they think the treatment will be. For instance, if a patient thinks a drug will help with their pain, they may perceive an improvement regardless of the true effect of the drug. So regardless of the true effect, they may perceive an improvement. So this can skew study results. To avoid a placebo effect, researchers may blind their studies. Now, what do we mean by blind? Well, blinding is often achieved by giving both the treatment group and the control group a similar appearing treatment. I have treatment in quotes there. The treatment group gets the real treatment involved in the study, whereas the control group gets a placebo. And that would be something that looks like the real treatment, but is inert, like a sugar pill or saline, so it would have no effect. But by giving both groups a quote treatment, so whether it's the real treatment or placebo, what this means is that the two groups, everyone in the two groups thinks they're getting something. So that's an attempt to mitigate the idea that because you're not getting something, you will have no improvement. So a single blind experiment is one in which the subjects or the patients, I didn't spell that right, try that again, the subjects or maybe the patients involved don't know if they're in the treatment or the control groups. So they are blind to whether they are getting the placebo or the real drug. And because they look similar, they can't tell from just looking they both are getting something, and so they are blind to whether they're getting the treatment or the control. So it's a way to try to have both the control, kind of have similar results. Some people are going to think because they get something that they're going to have improvement. Some people think that that's not going to be an impact for. So what it does is it kind of creates a level playing field in terms of how the patients react to the treatment they're getting. Now, there is another type of blinding that can happen. A double-blind experiment is one in which both the subjects and the researchers directly working with the subjects don't know who is in the treatment group or in the control groups. So the idea is that in a double blind, both the subject or the patient and the researcher, that might be the nurse that's working directly with them, don't know who's in which group. This can be helpful because sometimes the researcher, like the nurse, may subtly act more positive with someone they know is getting the drug and a little bit more negative with someone who is not getting the drug. And I don't mean that in terms of, being mean to people, being nice or mean to people. I mean, they might just act upbeat and, or with one group and maybe sympathetic with the group that's not getting the drug. And it's usually inadvertent, but they have found that that can happen. And so by double blinding the experiment, by making it so that neither the subject nor the person working directly with them knows, then what you have is there's no subtle hints toward what group you're in. This can be achieved in terms of the researcher by having someone who doesn't work with the subjects organize the drug or the treatment in advance. So they give coded drugs to the researcher who works directly with the subject. So all the researcher working directly with the subject knows is the code on the outside of the package. And so they put the patient's name down and the code down, and then they give that back to the behind the scenes researcher who can coordinate the code with whether that patient is getting the placebo or the treatment. Let's look at a few examples of experiments and determine what the treatment group, the control group is, and whether the experiment was blinded. So in the first example, we have a study involving people with arthritis pain were given a new drug to help with the pain. The pills taken by the subjects looked identical. Nurses working with the patients didn't know which packets of pills were the drug and which were the placebo. They just recorded a code on the packet. So the treatment group would be the arthritis sufferers who get the new drug. The control group would be those arthritis sufferers. And again, it's got to be the same type of person here. So arthritis sufferers for both. And those would be arthritis sufferers who do not take the new drug. They take a placebo. Now, it said that the patients don't know what they're taking because and that's implied by saying the pills look identical, and it's saying the nurses don't know what pills are in which packages. So this would be an example of what we would call a double-blind experiment. Second example. 1,000 people were randomly separated into two groups, with one group instructed to exercise daily for 30 minutes and the other group instructed not to exercise. The patients then recorded how long it took them to go to sleep after going to bed at night. So the treatment group would be the people who were told to exercise for 30 minutes a day. And then the control group would be those people who were told not to exercise. Now, there's no way to blind someone when when in terms of doing something and not doing something. And the same thing with the researchers. They know who's exercising, they know who's not exercising. So this would not be a blind study. Sometimes there's just no good way to actually create a blind. Third example, a study was conducted on the effects of magnets on back pain. Massage therapists placed magnets on some patients and non-magnetic patients with a similar appearance on other patients. The treatment group would be the patients who were treated with magnets, and then the control group would be those patients who were treated with this similar but non-magnetic object. So they may think they're being treated, but it's kind of they're being treated with a placebo. So a placebo. So placebos can actually be something you ingest, but it can also be a treatment that looks similar to the treatment you're investigating, but is not the same. All right, so because they're using a form of placebo, that means they're trying to make it so the patient doesn't know what they're being treated with, whether they're getting the magnet or not. So it's definitely blind. And it doesn't tell us much about the massage therapist, but my guess is the massage therapist would know whether the objects are magnetic or not, just simply because magnetic objects, all you need is something to attach to them, like a paper clip, and that would be probably easy for it to accidentally happen. So I would guess that this is a single blind study.